So I'm just letting a few people in and then we'll get started. Okay. Oh, the wondrous world of Zoom. Okay. How is everybody this morning? Okay.
Good.
Got some thumbs up. That's always a good sign. Okay.
To navigate through your presentation, just come out of Zoom and navigate in wherever it is.
Okay, yes, I was just about to ask you that, Vic. So
no worries. Even if it's easier, you can send it to me and I can share it on your behalf. But yeah, if you just come out of Zoom and share.
I think I should be okay. Yeah, there we go. I can handle it. It's fine. So
Brill, thanks, Nicola.
All right, before we start, in the spirit of PR, I'm just going to take a photo of my screen so that I can then do some social media things about how great Small Charity Week is, because it's amazing, right? Okay. Right, there we go. Right, good morning, everybody. If I'm looking distracted, I promise you I am not checking my emails, but I'm admitting people in as they appear as well. So hopefully most people are with us now. All right, well, thanks so much for having me. It's lovely to see a bunch of people from all sorts of different places here this morning, some familiar faces and some not, but hopefully by the end of this session we'll all know each other a bit better. So I'm Nicola Upton. I'm currently the CEO at Age UK Sutton. And due to a #SmallCharityLive room booking nightmare this morning, I'm actually in one of our interview rooms that we use when talking to members of the public here at Age UK Sutton. But I'm actually leaving this role in a couple of weeks, and I'm going to be the CEO of another charity called the Cares Family. So look them up, find out about them. They're amazing. I'm very excited and terrified. This also means that sort of technically, this is probably my last 2 weeks as a small charity CEO for a while. However, the Cares Family does loads of work with small charities and it's not that big either. So you can't get rid of me that easily is my core message here. So I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to talk about staff and volunteer management and motivation. Or as I would prefer to put it, building a happy workplace one rhinestone at a time. So any of you who are familiar with my social media, I'm a big fan of decorating things with rhinestones. So don't judge me for that, but just saying, it works for me. I do want to talk about a few things and then also have an opportunity for some discussion and some questions and just to talk about, you know, how we can really engage and motivate and support our people.
Could I ask everyone to mute their mics? Sorry, Nicola. Sonia, I think we're getting some noise from your mic. Could you mute it, please?
Oh.
Thank you.
That's all right, thanks. So I want to talk about management and motivation of people, and by our people I mean volunteers and employees as well. So I think, you know, both of these groups of people are so critical to us as leaders, as managers, as people working in small charities in whatever role that we are in. But what I really want to talk about is building a happy workplace. And that goes for everybody, leaders as well, by the way. So why focus on happiness? I think I can distill this into a few key points. So the first one is you keep great people and you get more done. So we all know that volunteer retention and staff retention is a big challenge in the charity world at the moment. But, you know, don't take it from me, take it from Oxford University. A study in 2019 found that being happy at work made people around 13% more productive. So, you know, there is actual science and everything behind this. But also for us, you know, we all know as people working in small charities that in our incredibly stretched world, where more for less is really an unrealistic goal a lot of the time, helping people thrive at work and in their volunteering can enable people to deliver better. And we all need that. We're all under so much pressure. And retention is a really big challenge right now. Again, something that we're all familiar with. And the evidence is that happy people stay put for longer. And that really helps us to do things better, to be a more effective place to work and volunteer. And we all know this already, right? If you're feeling good at work, you're more engaged, you're more motivated, you go the extra mile, you are able to be more creative, you have a stronger relationship with your colleagues. The second reason to prioritise happiness, and I do think it's really important to talk about this, is that it is the right thing to do. So just like the case for inclusion or the case for having an environmental policy or having favourable terms and conditions of employment and looking after your volunteers, enabling people to be happy at work is just the right thing to do, as well as the business benefits that you get from that. You know, we are all humans, I think. You're a human, I'm a human, working in a place full of humans. So we already know this, right? We know that it's the right thing to do to look after people. It's worth reminding ourselves, though, and it's worth thinking, are we actually focusing on that when we are changing the way we do things, when we are developing, when we are responding to challenges? And for me, this is about values. It's just considering, do we apply our values to our own people? I see a lot of charities that have amazing value statements about kindness and support and resourcefulness and compassion. And sometimes I think it's important for us to ask the question, are we applying that to the people who work and volunteer for us as consistently as we're applying it to the people who our charity or our organisation sets out to support? And the final reason to prioritise happiness is your life will be better. So, and frankly, don't we all need that? We've had a hairy few years. Life is really tough for small charities. And committing to building a happy place for staff and volunteers will make your life better. And the one thing I know with absolute certainty, this small charities week, with everything I've seen, is that you all deserve that. You deserve to enjoy what you're doing. You deserve to be happy. So what makes a happy workplace? And please do think your thoughts as we go along, and because I'd love to hear what everybody's got to say. So I'm going to talk about 4 features of a happy workplace. So this is how I'm going to talk about management and motivation. And for me, this is the cornerstone of good management and motivation for people in any place, employee or volunteer. So I'm going to keep saying people from now on, and I mean anyone, paid or unpaid, who does stuff in your charity or group. I crowdsourced some ideas from LinkedIn. So you'll see those comments in the speech bubbles on my slides. And if you want to connect on LinkedIn later, you can read the full post and all the feedback that people gave. So it was really interesting. And I do want to caveat what I'm about to say with, I am not claiming that I get this right all the time. None of us do. But I've learned a lot over the last 20-ish years, and I really hope that it helps and provides a little bit of inspiration. So I'm going to talk about trust, I'm going to talk about values, I'm going to talk about connection, and I'm going to talk about celebration. So trust. So whether paid or unpaid, at work or not, people appreciate trust. We also appreciate knowing the bounds of that trust. So what I mean by that is that trust isn't just about stepping back and leaving people to it. I trust you doesn't mean a lot without some extra information. So you trust me with what? You trust me to make what decisions? How much do you trust me? So whether working or volunteering, your people understand that they're delivering for an organisation that has some goals and some expectations. So being clear about what we can all get on with and what we need to get some help with is really important. Equally important is getting out of the way so that they can then get on with that thing we've told them that we're happy for them to get on with. We've all worked with someone, right, who's said, yeah, I trust you, just get on with it. And then 20 minutes later has been looking over your shoulder and going, oh, you're doing your slides like that, are you? And it's so disempowering. You know, better not to tell someone you trust them at all than to say it and contradict yourself. What I've found is that clear parameters of trust are really, really important, but by which I mean being really clear what you are trusting people with, what you're comfortable for people to do independently. It just means that everybody knows what's expected. So a few really simple things. A written down plan of agreed priorities. I don't mean a 4 million page strategy document. You know, that's not my bag anyway. I doubt that many of you have the time to do that either. But I mean literally, right, what are the things that are important this week or this month or this year? And a clear message also about how these can be flexed. So what I mean by that is we all make a plan and then things change. And so understanding what the process is to talk about what needs to change, what's fine for people to just do themselves, can actually be really empowering. So sort of setting out what the rules are gives everybody clarity about what framework they're working in. And talking about what you can stop if you start something else as well is really critical. The second really key way that you can demonstrate and build trust is having regular non-negotiable check-ins on how things are going. So what I mean by that is whether it's a formal let's chat for 15 minutes every week or half an hour every week, whether it's a kind of one-to-one meeting, or whether it's another structure that works for you and your colleagues, making sure that you are regularly catching up about how things are going means that people can then just crack on the rest of the time, but everybody knows where they stand. And then, as I said before, in between, stepping away and giving people the space to do what you've agreed, even if they're not going to do it the way that you would do it. I find that really hard, but it is really important to check in. Do I have an issue with the way this is being done for the organisation, or is it just not what I would do personally? The next one in terms of trust, which for me has been really important, is creating space for reflection, formal and informal, and being open to hear that reflection. So one of the features of my kind of crowdsourcing comments that other people gave was about giving people a say, but really importantly, actually listening to what people say. There's no point saying I want to hear what you want to share if you don't then actually take in what people tell you. Even the stuff that you don't agree with or that isn't easy to hear is so important to give people the space and time to talk about. So for me, at Age UK Sutton, we use a mixture of things because people communicate differently. So we use surveys, we have a monthly all staff in-person meeting, we hold volunteer meetings online and in person. And we also have a sounding board programme where we bring local older people together, because we're an older people's charity, to ask them what they think about what we're doing and to give people a say. And really importantly, every time we do that, we have a you said we did principle. So we go back to what did you tell us, what did you say, and what did we do in response? And then finally, and this is hard sometimes, trust your colleagues to make decisions. So whether you're a leader or whether you're the most junior person in your organisation, we all have to step back and give other people space to make decisions, including what you won't do. I recently facilitated the leaders at Age UK Sutton to hold a bonfire. I stole the idea from Wayne, who's one of the organisers of Small Charities Week, after I saw him tweeting about it. And I highly recommend this as a way of helping people to talk openly about what winds them up. It gave people space to talk about what's frustrating or difficult or feels like a bad use of time. And you really demonstrate trust in the end when you let go of power and include everybody in decisions, not just about what to do, but what not to do. And it is a bit scary because some of the things that my colleagues wanted to bin are things that I really like. but you know, that's what we have to do to have an open and transparent workplace. And they were right. For me personally, and I suspect for many of us, the hardest thing isn't the theory of trust, but the practice. I've had to make myself let go of control and challenge myself not to interfere. And I go back to what I said before, you have to mean it when you offer trust. People will smell it if you don't. One thing that's really helped me is telling my colleagues that I'm working on this and asking for their feedback. So it's some accountability, but it's also actually really helped me notice and practice what's really embodying that and what is not coming across as clearly as I would like it to be. So on trust, my challenge to you is to carefully consider, do you trust your people or not? If not, why not? And what can you do about that? And finally, what are you doing to elicit trust? Because we all know actions speak louder than words. So I'm going to move on and talk about values now. And what you can see in the picture is our values board that sits in my office. So we ask people to write how they've seen our values in action and pin them up on the board. And then we share these in a staff meeting once a month. And it works brilliantly as a way to really bring it to life. So we all know that having a statement of values is important, and most organisations have one of some sort. But what I said before about how we apply them in practice is what I want to talk about here. So over the last couple of years, I've been working a lot on bringing our values to life at Age UK Sutton and ensuring everyone feels connected to them. Because honestly, we were confident to a degree that we shared the same values, but we weren't checking in on them as much as we should have been. We also took time to consider how we applied our values in-house. So we're all confident we're using them when working with the public, but what about with one another? And as I said before, you see things like kindness, compassion, support, a lot of value statements for charities, but can we honestly say that we can spot that in our own organisation, in the way that we look after our volunteers, in the way that we look after our staff, in the way that we interact with each other? So some specific tangible things that have worked for me, I've run a couple of workshops to explore our values just for a couple of hours, so not a huge kind of long event, but just asking colleagues to consider how they apply in our work and asking people to give some specific examples of when, where and how they come to life, both in how we work with the public and also how we work with each other. We also talked about why we have values and who they apply to, when they're relevant, and specific examples of them in action. And we've committed to repeat this workshop annually to keep us focused and keep evolving. Feels like a really good use of a couple of hours once a year, and it seems to have really helped us. We recently started sharing our values in action. And the way that we've got this, we've got the paper forms that you can see in the picture, but we've also got a Microsoft form. So again, because we're, like many of us, we're partly remote working, it means that people can participate in whatever way works for them. And it's just a lovely way of really bringing it alive. And what I love is that we have been able to encourage and support colleagues to talk about themselves as well. So people working in charities find it really hard to talk about how great they are personally, right? And what we've found is that giving people explicit permission to share when they felt that they really embodied our values has been a lovely way of enabling and encouraging people to really think about their own practice. And that's been really motivating for colleagues to have that opportunity to think about themselves as well as big up each other, which is generally what we're all a lot more comfortable doing. So my second kind of something to consider for you when managing and motivating your people is this: how alive are your values? How are they applied in your workplace? And what can you do to make them real? So third, I want to talk about connection. This is Isla, and I do have permission to share her photo from her mum. So the power of connecting with other people is obvious, and most of us do some sort of public facing work. And we all know that connection, that link with another human being is absolutely critical. So whether you're connecting with beneficiaries, donors, or people whose lives you touch with your cause, you already know how to nurture connection. I don't think you would be in this game if you didn't. But it is so easy to forget about doing that with our own people. Earlier in my career, I was really concerned with the boundaries between work and life and being what I felt was professional. And I do still care about those two things. I am still professional, I promise. But my attitude about how to manage them has changed. I think it is professional to share that you are a human, that you care, and that you develop meaningful relationships at work. I still don't personally mix my work life and my personal life that much. That's my choice. But I do genuinely want to know about our people's lives. And if you know someone as a human, you can be that much better at seeing what they're doing at work in context and then support them to thrive. So what's worked for me over the years? Making sure I personally know everyone, including something about their non-charity self. One of the amazing things about working in a small charity is that you can, with a bit of effort, get to know everyone. And however small you are and however lovely you are, if you're a leader in your charity, you're probably still a bit intimidating to some people just by virtue of your role. So working on connection is really vital. Similarly, we're working remotely more and more. Though I know there are many charities that are fully remote now. And so nurturing connection in different ways is really, really critical to feel like you're part of something, part of a team. So when I joined Age UK Sutton, I took every member of staff out for a coffee in my first month. So I was highly caffeinated for several weeks. And I also met with all of our volunteers. And I asked them two things. What do I need to know? And what can I do to make life easier for you? And I learned so much from what was said and what wasn't said. So I really recommend, if you're moving into a new role, or even if you're not, try that. Just sit down with everyone for a cuppa, whatever role they're in, whatever level they're operating at. I still have a policy of having a coffee with every new member of staff and most new volunteers in their first couple of weeks, and meeting all of our volunteers. It doesn't cost much or anything if I make the drinks in the office, but it means a lot. And I make it clear it's not a weird extra interview, but a chance for me to share something about our history, something about our values, and for us to just get to know one another a bit. It's really lovely for me, and I'm told it means a lot to new starters. It's one of the things I love about working in a small charity. There are so many brilliant things about small charities, but the fact that you actually get to know everyone and you can have that real sense of community is so powerful. The other thing that we've done at Age UK Sutton is, for the last few years, we've also held a regular mingle for everyone connected to the charity. And yes, there is cheese and wine at these mingles sometimes. It's an informal event at a venue that we've managed to get for free. People buy their own drinks and we provide some nibbles. I'm sharing this because cost is such a big issue for all of us. This doesn't have to be a big fancy shiny thing at a hotel. You know, we go to a cricket club that's down the road. It's not fancy, but we put a bunch of balloons up and it looks pretty. It's not a big shiny party, and so far I've not managed to book Beyonce to perform. Never say never. But it is a chance for people to meet, mingle, get to know other people in our community. And a few key staff are asked to subtly facilitate by introducing people and encouraging them to chat. So our staff, our volunteers, our trustees all come together, get to know each other in an informal environment. And we also invite what we call alumni, so staff and volunteers who've left in the last year are included. And it's so lovely to catch up and stay connected. And actually, you know, if you want to be mercenary about it, keeping those contacts and holding on to those networks can be hugely beneficial to your organisation as well. So I'd really encourage you to make that effort, because the result is our people feel connected to one another and the charity, so much so now that new babies get branded gear handmade by our colleagues. So my question to you is, how connected do your people feel to each other? They might feel really connected to the cause and to the organisation, but what can you do to really help people to build those relationships and connections with one another? So finally, I want to talk about celebration. I get a lot of email spam, you probably do too, offering me a great price for an away day or team building experience, etc. which always make me laugh because what they think is a great price is so far beyond our budget. It is funny. Celebration doesn't have to be expensive. It just has to mean something. So here are a few things that have worked for me. Talking about what you're proud of. Each year I've introduced a "what have we done this year to make you proud" session. And yes, for those of you who are children of the 90s, obviously we did play Heather Small. So we use a simple printed sheet with boxes for personal, team and charity achievements, and there's some pictures of those on the slide. And I supplied cheap and gaudy decorations like stickers and rhinestones. That works for us. Might not be your bag, but I highly recommend it. These cost pennies, but it was so fun and uplifting. And the posters are now on display in our office so that everyone can read them when they need a pick-me-up. If we had an intranet or Slack, I think it's called, I'd put digital copies there too. So that's for future me to think about. So doing something where you tangibly write down what you're proud of and can reflect and share in that is really powerful. Secondly, I've introduced a lot of stuff around recognition in my organisation. And I know people have mixed feelings about recognising individuals, but actually it can be a really powerful positive force for everybody. So we give out a Volunteer of the Year award at our annual impact review event. So we hold a kind of celebration event with local stakeholders, which we can do as a small local charity. It spotlights one of our volunteers who's been really brilliant, but it's also a chance to highlight the achievements and commitment of other volunteers in the charity. We make the most of Volunteers Week. So like lots of us, a couple of weeks ago, we were putting together certificates, handwritten thank you cards, and we're holding a social event actually next week, which is a picnic. It takes effort, but it costs next to nothing. But it's a nice way of bringing people together to celebrate and share. The other thing that we've been doing for the last few years is our annual staff awards at Age UK Sutton. So we hold awards every year, voted for by the staff team, with categories that are linked to our values. It's fun, it's silly, and again, it's inexpensive. So the way I've got around the cost is I make upcycled trophies with random stuff I find around the office. They've been made with vases, they've been made with wrestler toys and plant pots, all sorts of things. And it's silly, but with my budget of £10 to make 6 trophies, I've managed to do something that our colleagues have really enjoyed. And it means something. And when we share the staff awards and our colleagues vote for each other, again, we don't just talk about the person who's won, we talk about all the people who were nominated and what was said about them. And I put a note together for everyone who was nominated about what their colleagues said in the nomination. So people get a lot of feel good out of it. So my takeaway from this is just find ways to celebrate that work for you. And it's not an even better if or a nice to have, it's really vital. I have to admit, with this one especially, it took me a while to persuade my trustees how important it was, because there was this sense of, well, everybody's, automatically motivated and we don't need to kind of do all this celebration and recognition stuff. It's not a good use of time. But I've won them round by just demonstrating the impact it has on how engaged and motivated people feel. Rhinestones are optional, but highly recommended. So, some tips and ideas. I would really recommend that you steal other people's ideas if you're stuck for inspiration with some of this. You can crowdsource. I've found that really helpful to do that on Twitter, on the Small Charity CEOs Facebook group. And if you're not a member, you should join immediately, and even on LinkedIn. Also, if you're a member of Akivo, they have some great forums, and that's a really good place to get ideas from other people. And what I've shared on this slide is the board that we have in our office. So we give colleagues the space to put motivational messages up on the wall. And the one that's up at the minute just summarises, I guess, what I want to say here. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good. So when you're telling people that, how and why you care about happiness, when you're finding out what matters to your people, when you're being clear about what you're doing and why, when you're communicating, celebrating, and stealing other people's ideas, it's all right if it's not perfect. It's all right if it's not the best ever. It's all right if it's not what you've seen that Google does. Just do something because your people deserve it, and you deserve it because you deserve to really enjoy being at work as well. So I'm going to stop talking now, and hopefully open up to have a bit of discussion, or if anyone's got any questions. No, Emmy. Hi.
Hi, thanks. That was really useful. I think the clear parameters of trust and just having that conversation with my direct report will be really useful. So I started at Glitch only 2 months ago, not even 2 months yet. And it's the first time I line manage someone. So that's why I wanted to join the webinar today. Glitch is fully remote. We're about 10 members of staff all working from home. So I am learning how they're working, and I just thought it was maybe interesting to some of you to share. So where I've worked before has been what I would call quite traditional and very much doing things like you talked about, Nicola. And Glitch has a very different approach to well-being of staff and to culture. We have one thing we have as part of the induction of all the staff. We have user manuals. So each member of staff has a manual where they say what they like, what they dislike, how they like to receive feedback, what their strengths, what their weaknesses, and it is mandatory to read them and to have a conversation within the first 2 weeks with the other staff. And it's a fantastic icebreaker, and it makes you realize that the values are really lived. So in terms of sharing ID, as a new member of staff at Glitch, I would recommend that. Obviously it depends on capacity. We're only 10 members of staff, but having that user manual so you get to know each of your colleagues through that, I thought was a good idea. Yeah,
that's a great idea, and I've seen that. I'm going to nick that. That's what I mean, steal other people's ideas. I've seen before people use a kind of one-page personal profile when someone talks about their preferences and their strengths and all of that, and it's such a nice way of giving people permission to talk about who they are, as well as giving everybody really vital information. That's amazing. Thanks, Noemi. I've got VC Lambeth Mediation Service. Tell us your name as well, please.
Hello, hi. So Vice Chair. Thank you so much for that. I've taken a lot in. I just wanted to go back to the check-ins, which I do find for me personally is a bit of a challenge, because I'm quite an emotional person, and it's like, I won't go into the detail, but it's not been conducive for me personally, and I just don't like it at all. But if I'm on the up, it's fine. So it's like everybody has to kind of adjust accordingly and what kind of mood is she in, and I just think, is there an alternative way to sort of say, other than, how's your day been, of I think we were thinking of what's something positive that happened in your day today, or something like that, as an alternative. So it's just really for those of us who don't feel that asking how we're doing today is appropriate. It's about finding alternative ways to kind of engage. I just wanted to have your thoughts on that, Nicola.
Yeah,
thank you again for today.
I think that's such an important point, and I think, I mean, we could talk about this all day, couldn't we? Maybe we should, just an idea. But yeah, I think check-ins, let's face it, kind of one-to-ones or supervisions or check-ins, whatever we call them, they can be brilliant or they can be unbelievably painful, can't they? Because they can feel really, they can feel trite, they can feel just like a thing that we have to do. So I think what's really critical is thinking about what's going to work for you and your people, and I think there's something around building that trust and openness so that anyone that you're talking to can share how things really are, and knowing enough about someone to kind of know, as you say, that some people are quite up and down, or might be going through something at work or outside of work. So for me, I think rather than how's your day going, tell me something good that's going on, I think a very simple what do we need to talk about today, can be a great way to open the conversation, because then you're handing the power to the person that that conversation is with, and you're also learning a huge amount about what actually matters to them in that moment. But it also gives you the ability, through whatever they say to you there, for you to kind of notice, okay, what are they not saying? And depending on your relationship and kind of what needs to be done, to sort of say, oh, I've just noticed, you know, you're not telling me much about how you're feeling, but you seem a bit down. And do you want to talk about that? Because, you know, we don't all want to draw that emotional support from our manager or from our colleagues. You know, we're all different. Like, personally, I'm quite contained about that stuff at work, but it's still nice to know that someone's noticed, I think. No.
Great.
So
Excellent.
I would say, what do we need to talk about today can be a really great, very neutral way to start that kind of conversation.
Excellent. Thank you, Nicola.
Oh, you're welcome. Okay, I can see Anna from Sunrise Diversity has her hand up. Anna.
Hi, I'm going to just be a floating voice because I've got a terrible cold, so bear with me. So I'm loving so many of these ideas, and things like the award ceremony sounds brilliant. The regular mingle sounds brilliant. I've got notes, little stars next to things. It's great. We've, like, as a charity, we've gone through quite a difficult year with ups and downs, and there's been a lot of insecurity for a lot of members of staff, a lot of change, and that's not going to be changing anytime soon. So next 6 months, I know, is going to bring further change for everybody. So with a lot of these things, yes, do kind of integrate, a lot of these things. But like I said, there are a lot of things where I think, oh, values board, that's great, regular mingle, this and that. Is it better to have a strategy with this and to think and plan ahead, or do you kind of just try, okay, well, let's try and do a little bit of this and see if this goes well, see if it happens, especially with a situation like we're in, which is probably not unusual for small charities, especially at the minute, difficult times. Is it better to have a plan, or just to try different things to bring the mood up?
So I think, especially, so just a bit of context for me. Before I was in this role, I spent about 10 years as a change manager in charities. So I feel you. It's so tough when you're going through change, because how do you keep people motivated and engaged and feeling positive when actually things are pretty tough, right? So I think there's a few strands to that. I think it is useful to have a bit of a plan, to have a sense of, this is something that we're going to commit to doing every year or every month or whatever, because one of the things that we as human beings like, and I really hope there's no qualified psychologists in the virtual room right now, because now you're going to judge me for not knowing what I'm talking about. But one of the things that I've observed that people like is we like structure and we like routine. And actually, in times of uncertainty, knowing that there's some structured stuff happening and there's some things that we always do, even when times are tough, can make people feel quite safe and quite held. So things like the checking in on your values can become even more important at times of turmoil and uncertainty. I think with things like the more social side of it, the mingles and stuff, I would say if you're going through change, you've got to time that carefully, because if you're going to have, I obviously don't know anything about your situation, so just to be clear, this isn't about you, but say you're doing a redundancy consultation, doing a mingle in the middle of that process, probably not the best timing, you know what I mean? But there's something about thinking about the timing, but those things like regular check-ins and talking about values can actually help you go through change processes and help people to feel, safe and valued and important. The other thing I would say, which doesn't really relate to my presentation, but relates to your question, is if you're managing change, in my experience, the most important thing is that trust and honesty. So although I've talked about trust in terms of work, actually trusting people with information, being as transparent as you possibly can be. So I talk a lot about a default position of trust. So we share everything unless there's a very specific reason not to. And that does really help people. And what I've found when I've done really tough change programs and made people redundant, had to change roles, all sorts of things, is that even if people aren't coming out of a process like that with the outcome that they would prefer, if they feel confident that you've told them the truth consistently throughout, generally you can make that process dignified and supportive and ultimately as positive as possible. So that's really worth keeping in mind, I think.
It's really, really useful. Thank you so much.
Oh,
yeah,
you're so welcome.
I
You're
think
so
actually
welcome.
looking at the 4, kind of put the focus on trust and values, and then the things that sound fantastic, connection and celebration, yes, but I'm thinking, oh, do we do that now?
Yeah.
I think people would love it. I think it would be good, but maybe
Maybe
in 6 months'
something
time and focus on
yeah.
the really hitting hard with the trust and values in a really positive way. And then connect and celebrate
absolutely.
when we're through the tough bits.
Yeah, and actually that stuff around connection and celebration, if you do go through change and turmoil, that can be a really powerful way to kind of rebuild that sense of connection and community, as long as you keep doing it consistently. I think that's what's really important. I'd also say that in my experience, doing some of these things consistently over time means that when you do hit bumps in the road, when you do hit times when there are tough times for your organisation, it is easier. It does make the process easier it makes it easier to talk about, and you build that sense of confidence from your people, whether that's staff or volunteers or anyone else, that you do what you say and you say what you mean. And that, if you think about it, what matters to you as an individual matters to the people around you. What is more frustrating than someone saying, oh yes, I care about this, or I do this, and then their action's not reflecting that? It means that you don't believe them when they say the next thing. And so that it really does help. The other thing that's probably worth saying on that is, as I was talking earlier about, being honest about your own journey as well, whether you're a leader or not. If you're trying to change the way you do things or the way that your team or your organisation does things, talk to your colleagues about that. Tell people that, A, to hold yourself accountable, but B, because it really helps people to feel confident that you're on a learning curve as well. Actually, there's something really powerful about showing that we're all growing and we're all developing and we're all trying to do things differently. And again, that builds trust, because you're showing that vulnerability and you're showing that commitment, and you're also talking honestly about the bits that you're finding difficult. And that can be really powerful and really, really valuable to hear. I've taken that from leaders that I've worked with, when I've had managers who've acted as if they're on everything and on top of everything, and I've had other managers who've been honest with me about what they're finding difficult, and I know who I've learned the most from. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome. We're nearly at the end of our allotted time. So any last questions or comments anyone wants to share, or I shall wrap up. So thanks.
Nicola, there was a couple in the chat. Do you want me to
were
read
there?
those out?
Oh yes, please. Sorry, I can't see.
And we might
Yes,
not, that's okay. We've only got a minute left, so I'll just read them out and then maybe there's a very quick response.
Yeah.
So one question was from Emily about celebrating volunteers when most of them are remote and you can't sort of physically get in the same space as them. And a question from Alexander about how to deal with somebody whose values or approach doesn't fit with the rest of the organizations.
Okay.
Maybe tricky to do both of those with our 1 minute.
Yeah.
Left, but,
okay. So right, well, we can do this.
We can
So
stick around for a couple of minutes if people want to.
And people whose and maybe someone whose values or approach don't fit. I think this is the same question, actually. So this is about how you build that sense of connection with volunteers. So in terms of celebrating volunteers who are remote, I think all the stuff I've talked about, you don't have to do in person. So you can do an event on Zoom. Something that we did during the pandemic, which our staff and volunteers loved, was that we did a Christmas party and we sent everyone a little box of goodies. And then the party was all about open envelope 1, open envelope 2. And we did really stupid stuff like a scavenger hunt in your own house. So again, we didn't send people loads of expensive stuff, but we sent them a kit to have a party that we then did on Zoom. So you can do a celebration remotely. It just takes some creativity. And the way that I came up with those ideas was Google. I just Googled how to have a good remote party with no money, literally. And I got loads of ideas. I also asked people on the Small Charity CEOs Facebook group for ideas and had loads of suggestions. And in terms of values and approach, I think once somebody's in, that's really challenging. But I think it is again about being consistent about the message and then being brave about how you address it. And, you know, there's probably not time to unpack that now, but if you're in doubt, get some advice. Get some advice from someone you trust who you think has been through this kind of thing before. Because it's really important to think, is this just that our personalities aren't quite the same, or is this a fundamental issue and maybe this person shouldn't be working or volunteering here? They're two quite different issues. I'd say the best way to address that issue, and I appreciate that might not be apply with this particular question, but start with values when you're bringing people in, and then you minimize the risk of that happening. You minimize the risk of having someone who doesn't at least appreciate and understand your values, even if they don't always share all of them. And let's face it, we don't all demonstrate our values all the time, you know, and that's okay. It's when it becomes a consistent issue that has an impact on other people or on your work that you've got to worry. So I hope that that's helpful. And thanks so much everybody for being here. Do find me if you're interested in staying connected on the social media. So I'm on Twitter and LinkedIn and all those kind of things. I'm also a member of the Small Charity CEOs Facebook group, which is really great. I'm plugging that just because I have found that the most unbelievably useful resource for talking to other people. So you don't have to be a CEO, but if you are a leader of a small charity, then that's the point of the group. It's to give people space to talk and take part in more Small Charity Week stuff, but stay in touch with Small Charity Week people as well afterwards, because this is an amazing community. And just I want to say a big thanks also to Vic and Wayne and Nicola for the alarming amount of work that they've done to make this week happen. I think it's been incredible, and thanks so much everybody.